I'm Jane Rips. Today is November 6th, 2023, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Richard Friedman and Pete Brodkey, and they're going to tell us something about their families and where they're from and where their parents grew up. So take it away.
Well,
Go ahead, Rich, you go first.
our parents were Ray Brodkey and Pauline Friedman, who were sisters. There were 4 siblings. Harold Bernstein was the boy, and Shirley Kulikovsky was the third. And the 3 sisters were inseparable. They were just as close as any sisters ever were. And the Brodkeys and the Friedmans lived 2 short blocks apart. We lived on North 58th Street, and the Brodkeys lived on George Boulevard in the 600 block. And we were no locks in those days. Peter was born in 39, I was born in 43. Now we're talking 50s. And we were back and forth in and out of each other's houses.
Like every day.
Every day. Peter had a wonderful dog named Tuffy. There were no leash laws in those days, so Tuffy spent as much time at our house as he did at the Brodkeys. He was a very smart dog. He got fed both places.
We literally grew up together.
We grew up together.
We grew up together.
More like siblings than
I
cousins.
was 4 years older, and I was not the kindest, greatest kid in the whole wide world, but these were my cousins.
Oh, he was the best. Nobody ever had a better cousin. He was my big brother. He has a younger sister named Susie, who's 6 weeks younger than I am, and Susie and I were siblings as much as cousins. And I have a sister who's only 18 months older, Judy, now Judy Firetag. And when Judy, Susie, and I, every Saturday, Peter would go to the movies, and he would be told by his parents, "You're taking Judy, Susie, and Richard." He would go with Steve Simon or Neil Steinberg, or those are the 2 I remember the most.
Yeah, those are the 2 that went with us.
Those
Those are the
and
2,
we'd
yeah.
go to
those are
the
the 2 that
Dundee
went
Theater
with
to
us
the
most.
serials, and Peter not only didn't complain, I never had the feeling that I was not. Looking back on it, I can't imagine he did. They were talking about an 8 or 10-year-old kid to schlep along these little kids. He was wonderful. It's like he really wanted us to be with him, which I don't think was true. I think he was just wonderful.
Steve Simon and I would take bicycle trips on Saturdays sometimes. And we would go from George Boulevard, which is actually 60th and Underwood,
Right.
and ride our bicycles all the way out to 90th. That was a heck of a trip.
Well, and 90th in those days was a cornfield.
And 90th was these were all. I was born across the street from a cornfield and a lake.
Yeah.
We would ride out there, and the old highway patrol station was on 72nd or 78th. But there was a big sign there, "Welcome to Omaha, 305,000. I thought that I was in the biggest metropolis in the whole world. That was the peak of our entertainment.
I love that. And I bet your parents didn't worry too much about you.
We didn't lock the front doors, like as Richard said. We didn't lock the front doors.
So, where were your parents from?
Uh,
Were they born in the United States?
Yes. The Bernstein family, our mothers were Bernsteins, were Lou and Grace Bernstein's children. And they were born in Council Bluffs, Iowa, born and raised. Abraham Lincoln High School. Aunt Ray was born in 1914.
Yeah, 1914. My dad was born in 1913.
Right, and my mom...
She was the oldest of all the kids.
Yeah, she was the oldest, and my mom was the next in line, born in 1916 in Council Bluffs. My dad was also born in Council Bluffs, 1893, big age difference between my parents. Also Abraham Lincoln High School. And then Harold in 1921, 21, and Shirley in 1926.
Richard's dad was kind of neat. Richard, I don't know if he'll come up to it, But Richard's dad actually served as an infantry officer in World War I.
Yeah.
A young guy.
Well, no, he was born in 1893. He wasn't even that
Oh,
young.
you're right, you're right.
Yeah.
And where did he serve? Did he go
In France,
overseas?
yeah, he served in France. He went over on a troop ship when the influenza broke out. He was a second lieutenant, but he was a company commander because his company was all black. It was a segregated army, and they weren't going to waste captains on black troops. And 4 officers in an on-deck cabin that had a porthole. It was a 2-person cabin, but my dad said it wasn't too bad. The black troops were down in the
hall.
on the hold of the ship.
Yeah.
No windows, and the influenza epidemic broke out. Oh, and they were at sea a long time. They did what my dad called a zigzag course to avoid German submarines. They were at sea, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. And every morning, my dad had to organize a work party, and they carried the bodies out and did at-sea burials. And my dad, that really scarred my dad for life. The troops he was in charge of guarded an ammunition dump, which was both scary and not scary. If a stray shell had hit, my dad said there wouldn't even been an atom left. It just would have, but it would have been instantaneous. But he didn't have to charge any enemy machine guns or anything. So he had these troops guarding the ammunition dump. He said the trip over was really scarier because these healthy young men were dying. I don't know what this has to do with it.
No, it does, because when we grew up, Uncle Herman, okay, it does. What was the thing that I had to go to the sheriff's office and mail to you because you couldn't take it across straight lines? Uncle Hermie's 45 automatic that he took home from the war, and when Aunt Pauline sold her house and Richard wasn't here, they gave it to me. And I kept it clean, and of course I never used it or anything. And I kept it in a safe place. But Richard moved to New York City, and he couldn't get permission for me to send the 45 because you couldn't do it across straight lines, across lines. And finally, Richard made friends with the county sheriff.
But we had a weekend house. I live in New York City, in Manhattan. We had a weekend house in western Massachusetts, the town of West Stockbridge. And
I've been there many times.
And the sheriff happened to be Jewish. Not the sheriff, the chief of police. Title: Chief of Police, 3-man police force. But the chief was this really nice Jewish guy, and we became friends. And I was talking about this. I said I really would like to get that. He said no problem. He said ship it to me. So he said because cops can receive guns. So Peter arranged.
I arranged to ship it, and we shipped it out. And Richard has it posted in his dining room or living room.
In our den. I have.
On the den.
My
right.
daughter actually had it framed for me, very nicely framed, and it's up in my den.
I love that. And do you still have a home in the Berkshires?
No, we sold it about 5 years ago.
We have good friends who we go to visit almost every summer in the Berkshires. And they lived in both Great Barrington and West Stockbridge.
Well, our house is almost on the boundary between Great Barrington and West Stockbridge. It was technically West Stockbridge, but it was right on the boundary.
Couldn't be more beautiful.
Gorgeous country.
Yeah. So, okay, so did you both go to Central?
Oh, yes. Peter spent his first 4 years at Harrison.
Well, when I went to Central, I went there my freshman and sophomore year. I was really quite wild when I was young. And my junior year, they felt it best that I went to Wentworth Military Academy, which I absolutely hated more than anything in the whole wide world. So my senior year, I came back to Central and made the honor roll. But I was still had those wild oats in me. So they weren't kicked out for a while.
Funny.
And Peter started his grade school at Harrison, and then 4th grade.
Dundee.
And then 4th grade on.
Went to Dundee and then went to Central.
And Judy, Susie, and I were Dundee K through 8. It was an 8th grade school in those days. And then Central, of course. Peter's class of
57.
57, and Judy was class of 60, and Susie and I were class of 61.
Everybody in my family but me went to Central because I grew up in Sioux City.
Yeah.
But including my husband's parents and his grandmother.
Of course.
Yeah.
My dad went to Central High School. Did you know that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, my dad went to Central High School.
And the grade school he went to was that old brick building where the Northern Natural Gas tower is now.
That's right. Even my wife Nancy today, she was not raised in Omaha, but 3 out of her 4 kids went to Central, and most of the 9 grandchildren she has went to Central. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
Stephen went to Central.
And one of my kids went to Central.
The other 2 went to Westside.
Yeah, no, went to Burke.
Went to Burke. Oh, you're Omaha Public School all the way.
Yeah, so we're Omaha. Omaha for a brief time when you're done with high school, you're gone for a little while, and that's it.
Well, that sounds great. So how about colleges?
I went to the University of Wisconsin undergraduate, and then I have a PhD, and it's from Rutgers. And when I hated New Brunswick. It was a filthy old, it's been gentrified now, it's actually quite nice. But in the 60s, it was this ugly old industrial town. It looked like something out of an English movie from the English Midlands. It was ugly red brick mills, and everything was covered with soot. And I moved up to Greenwich Village in New York, which I loved. And I met a New York girl, and she was not going to leave New York. And so I've been in New York ever since. And I love New York. I love living in New York.
None of that Omaha stuff for her.
No, she likes visiting here. She loves my family. She's closer to my family than to her family. She only has 3 cousins she keeps up with. But this is her family.
So, okay, that's a good question. How many cousins do you all have? And
I have no idea.
They're uncountable. Well, it depends on your definition of cousin.
well, could be first, second, third, fourth.
Well, Nancy's now my cousin.
Right, of course.
So, and is absolutely my cousin. So, and second cousin, Bruce Springsteen was my 3rd cousin. You mentioned Bruce
So
Springsteen.
Phyllis was my 3rd cousin.
And so Phyllis was our 3rd
Yeah,
cousin.
Mickey, her mom was a Krasny in Fremont.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And she and our mothers were first cousins, I think. First cousins or second? Whatever.
Second cousin.
Second cousins, right, because their kids were 3rd cousins. So the Krasny clan is enormous. And through the Krasny, I don't know how many cousins we have. A lot.
And there were Krasny's in Council Bluffs.
This
Well,
Council Bluffs, that was the Krasny.
That was something called the People's Store.
That was our family's thing. Our grandfather had the hardware department. He and they were Bernstein. They were the only in-laws. Everybody else was Krasny's. And his brother Mose and our grandfather had the grocery store on the ground floor, and then just the empty space in the basement. This was around the time of the First World War. And they started handling a little hardware. And they found they were making more money out of hardware than they were out of groceries. And they sold the grocery department to a family named Meyerson. And they called it the hardware store, but it sold everything. Large appliances, small appliances, paint, toys, guns. They had a big gun department that drove everybody in the family crazy. They were constantly being burgled for having the guns stolen.
They actually, my grandfather and Richard's grandfather, Lou Bernstein, was exceptionally well known in Council Bluffs during the Depression because he did a lot of business with farmers. He let their bills stand,
Yeah.
and without him giving them supplies, they couldn't have made it. And Richard was told this over and over again.
Well, when their 50th anniversary, they were married. I can remember this because it's my daughter's birthday. They were married June 29th, 1913. So on June 29th, 1963, at their 50th anniversary, Peter was in the Marines, so he couldn't come in for the party. But there was this big family party, and it was multiple steps. There's a big thing at Highland, a big thing at Temple. had a second wedding ceremony. But in the Chieftain Hotel at Council Bluffs, they put an ad in the Council Bluffs Nonpareil saying, reception for Grace and Lou Bernstein, open house. The place was mobbed. And I can't tell you how many of these guys came in, weathered, beaten up old farmers who said, let me tell you, or they'd say, you Lou Bernstein's grandson, same line, the same story. You Lou Bernstein's grandson, I'm Lou Bernstein's grandson. Let me tell you about your grandfather. If it hadn't been for him, that just loved him. And another Lou Bernstein story that ties into the almost Jewish community. The rabbi at Temple Israel from, I don't know, the mid-40s to early 50s was a guy named Lou Silberman, who lived next door to the Brodkeys.
Next door to us. Lou lived next door to us.
And Lou and Peter's dad became best friends.
They liked to drink scotch together.
Every night after dinner, Lou would come over, and Lou and Eddie would have several scotches.
Several scotches together.
They're a great family. Their daughter, Cyril, is still a close friend of mine. She lives in Boston. Her sister died very young.
Debbie.
Debbie. It was a sad story. Cyril's great. Anyway, one Sunday afternoon, Lou had a hospital call, I think Jenny Edmondson or someplace, and he was going over for this hospital visit, and he got caught speeding, and he didn't have his driver's license with him. He had gone out without his wallet, so they arrested him, and they said, you can make one call. So he called our grandfather. Lou told me the story. I stayed friendly with Lou.
Grandpa was really mad.
Lou came to New York a lot, and we had lunch together when he came. He said, let me tell you about your grandfather. So everybody says, let me tell you about your grandfather. Everybody had a Lou Bernstein story. So Lou Silberman called Lou Bernstein, and Lou Bernstein walked into the police station. He was 5'2" and weighed probably 180 pounds. He didn't look fat though. He looked like a bear. He was sleek looking, good head of hair. I always thought a nice looking guy. And he came in, and I'm not quoting Lou Silberman. Lou Bernstein said to the policeman, he is my rabbi, let him go.
And they did.
And they did. And people talk about we grew up with anti-Semitism. I said, no, there was other kinds of anti-Semitism, but that was.
And our grandmother was quite a gal too. She believed in cooking in schmaltz.
Yes, everything was in schmaltz.
Everything was, it was a heart attack on the way. But that's what she believed in. And she didn't believe in making beds. She used to say, we're letting them air out.
Yes.
Yes, we're letting them air out. And Grandma and Grandpa couldn't drive worth a darn. Grandma never learned how to drive. And Grandpa, well, tell them about Grandpa, and then I will fill in some stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, his father, Peter Bernstein, Peter Brodkey is named after him, died when Grandpa was, I think, in 8th grade. He was 12 years old. And Grandpa dropped out of school. He lived in Omaha. They hadn't moved to Constellation yet. And he got his first job driving a butcher's delivery wagon. Mm-hmm. And he was born in 1887.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, we're talking 1900. He didn't get his first car until the 1910s at some point. He was already a middle-aged man. He was the world's worst driver. He drove the car as if you were driving a horse-drawn butcher wagon. And he gave you the same advice?
Oh, yeah, drive, yeah.
Always drive in the middle of the road so there's less danger of falling off either side, and never go more than 25 miles an hour.
And he never did.
He was horrible. But Grandma would not drive, wouldn't even attempt it. And your dad, who was he's always a terrific driver, and was a few years older than Aunt Ray. They started dating in high school, Aunt Ray and Uncle Eddie. He would come over from Omaha, and he taught first Aunt Ray to drive, and then he taught my mom to drive. I think your mom was 14 or something.
Oh, yeah, she'd been driving.
And my mom was 12, and there's no licenses in those days. And Grandma would have them drive. So one day a month, each girl, not the same day, so it was every other week, the girls had to stay home from school, and they would take the car, and they'd drive into Omaha, and they would have a a charapa disappointment. His grandma loved that. And they'd go shopping at Brandeis. And they would
They
have
had lunch at their favorite
King, is that something?
King Fong.
King
Oh.
King
Fong.
Fong.
And they'd have,
The best.
they'd have lunch at King Fong's. So one day a month, my mother and another 2 weeks later, Aunt Ray would drive grandma. They were not allowed to go to school those days. So,
Okay, and then during horse race season, when exorbitant was exorbitant, if I was home, if I was still in town, because in those days,
but
You know-
Peter, you're getting to start tell our family connection to exorbitant.
oh, okay. Lou Bernstein's first cousin was Jake Isaacson. Do you have any
Actually,
idea?
his nephew, technically.
Yeah, his grandpa's nephew was Luke Isaacson, was Jake Isaacson. Do you guys have any idea who he was?
No, I don't.
Jake Isaacson built and ran Exorbitant.
He was the executive director
He
from
was,
the beginning.
and he was big time. He stood about 5 foot tall. We weren't talking about big people here. He stood about 5 foot tall, didn't have any kind of rush voice or anything. And my grandmother and my grandfather loved the horses. And he, of course, he gave them the tickets right up in front. And he had a runner to make the bets for them, so they wouldn't have to do that. The only thing they had to do was get back and forth to the racetrack. And that's where I came in. If I was here, I'd pick Grandma and Grandpa up at a set time, drive to a set place where only you could pull into if you had a little thing in your car, let them out, they were escorted up there, and then at a set time, I would drive back, pick them up, and take them wherever they wanted to go. And they did that, I don't know how long they did that, but they did that while I was in town. You know, you leave town for different things, and then you grow up and come back and make it your home. So that's our grandparents' story. And, you know, be with our grandparents were worthwhile because they were wonderful. They were wonderful people. They really were.
They were.
We learned a lot from our parents and our grandparents.
And we're leaving something out. We spent a lot of time with them. I worked for my grandpa in the summer when I was in high school. But every Sunday, the entire family would gather at our house. We had, actually, I don't think it ended up being the biggest house. But in the 50s, we had this much, the largest house. And my mother she was an adequate cook, but she wasn't a happy cook. So the deal was our house, and Aunt Ray, who was a marvelous cook, and Grandma, who was a marvelous cook, would bring the food. Uncle Artie Kulikovsky had exorbitant meat, and he would bring a New York strip, and Grandma and one of us would drive over the time we were able to drive. We had to wait until we got our licenses. Well, actually, Peter didn't.
I didn't know I was driving at 14.
Peter was driving 14, but the rest of us had to wait till we got our licenses. One of us would drive over and pick up Grandma and Grandpa because
No, we didn't
want
want
it
him
on our
driving over the
conscience.
bridge.
Well, he would do it, but we didn't want it on our conscience.
Right.
It was they were dangerous on the road. And every Sunday, we would gather in our house and just these family dinners. And Grandma would bring over, she made the best chopped liver. She rendered her own schmaltz, Peter was talking about. Everything was schmaltz. She also made great rice pudding. I wouldn't be surprised if there was schmaltz in that too. It was...
Yeah, the one thing that my grandmother did is, our grandfather was head of the Western Iowa War Production Board, and once on Saturdays, and I don't know if it was every Saturday, he went to the farms and he asked them, and he wrote down and kept track of what they were going to produce and what they was producing and what was coming up. That was an important war effort.
Yeah.
That really was. Anyway, he had an old Plymouth, 4 doors, and he had a pillow in back with a blanket, and I went with him. And at that time, why meat was rationed, he did not have a ration card for gas because he was He didn't need that, so he could drive all over. And the only thing that farmers could give him were chickens. And we'd bring the chickens back, and my grandmother would fry chickens. We had fried chickens on Monday. We had fried chickens on Tuesday. We had fried chicken on Wednesday. To this day, and you can ask Nancy, I don't eat fried chicken.
Peter's just enough older. I don't remember. That was where I was born in
No,
43.
Richard, I was 4 years old. You
Yeah,
were just born.
yeah. Grandpa's other job was before the war. He was the chairman or the head, I don't know what the title was. He was the chief honcho of what was called the Joint Distribution Committee for Southwest Iowa. So any Jewish refugees that came to Council Bluffs, and I don't think there was a lot, but in the 30s, and they would stay in the Bernstein house, and for anywhere from a day to a couple of weeks, and Grandpa would get them settled. He'd get them jobs and find them apartments. He was a macher in the community.
Obviously. And where is he buried? Where are your grandparents buried?
In Council Bluffs.
They were just there. I was going to go, but this leg is really, it's getting better now. Nancy's kicked me a couple times, that's why it hurts.
She's ferocious.
She's a nurse, by the way. So she bandages it up real well.
Good for you.
I took pictures of their graves. All four of my grandparents are buried in the two Jewish cemeteries in Council Bluffs, and my father's grandparents. So that's...
I've been there a number of times, and your relatives there.
Here,
We spent 30 minutes there one day last year trying to find my grandmother and grandfather's gravesite. Richard found it. We couldn't do it, but we were there, 30 minutes or so? 40
Peter,
minutes?
I'll draw you a little sketch map. It's really easy to find.
Okay. I mean,
Well, there are two sides.
There's two sides. Well, I don't know the direction. As you approach it from the more common direction, the one on the right was the Orthodox one, and I have the name here.
Well, I even called Patty Nog, and yeah, I still got it screwed up.
Where is it?
But it's beautifully maintained there.
That's what Richard, that's what
it was great. They've done a great job. Oh, it's beautifully maintained. I was very pleased to see it.
Because of that.
Anyway, it's Orthodox on the right,
Right.
and non-Orthodox, Reform and Conservative on the left. The Reform one has a name, something like Pleasant Hills or some English name, and the Orthodox one is Bocher
Holim.
Halim. But they've now merged them, I think, corporately.
And it's really quite lovely. And it's a real pretty spot.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
And what about your parents? Where are they?
My parents. My parents. 3 generations. Both of my parents, all 4 of my grandparents, and my father's grandparents are all in there.
That's remarkable.
As well as some great aunts and uncles, and our Uncle Harold is there. I couldn't find Uncle Harold's.
Because that's not the cemetery he's in.
He wasn't buried in Council Bluffs?
No, he was buried in Omaha.
How did that happen?
We were at his funeral.
I was at his funeral. You're right. He's at the Temple Cemetery.
He's at Temple Israel Cemetery.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't find
Harold
it.
Bernstein.
Yeah.
Temple Israel Cemetery, I swear.
No, I believe you.
You know where the steps are?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, where the steps are. Okay, step to the right, and you'll find his tombstone.
There you are.
Harold Bernstein.
Yeah.
Harold and Millie.
Yeah. Well, I knew their kid. I know their kid.
Yeah, sure. You
Our
told me you
cousins,
did.
John and
Kay.
Kay Goldstein.
While we were in Nifty together.
Oh.
And John and I are the same age. Kay's a little older, a couple of years older.
Yeah.
But we were all in youth group together.
John was just in town for the Lair wedding.
Oh. Yeah.
You get going on the family, the Friedman family. You need a PhD in anthropology to figure it out. Joni is my close relative.
I didn't
Joni
realize
Lair.
that.
So she's her mother and I were first cousins. Sylvia Mayer. And then when Sylvia died and my father died, my mother and Al got married. So Joni is both my first cousin once
I
removed
love that.
and my stepsister.
I think that's so sweet.
My wife says only in Omaha and Appalachia.
I didn't know that. That's very charming.
So anyway, there's
So
that.
were you here for the wedding?
Yeah, that's why I came in for this
And was it
for
fun?
Avery's. Oh, it was a lot of fun. It was a beautiful wedding. So Avery got married on Saturday,
Right.
and John and his wife Nancy are very friendly with John Lair and Sandy Lair in Colorado because they're in Colorado a lot now. And anyway, they were invited not as relatives but as family friends.
Isn't that, well, John and Sandy are in Colorado probably
Yeah.
more than they're
They are, yeah.
And I love John Lair. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
He's my complicated relative. He's my step nephew, as well as my first cousin 3 times removed or something like that.
He is a funny guy. He has a cute
He's
sense of humor.
very funny.
And, I love that story. And so was it a nice wedding?
Oh, it was.
Did you go?
No, they're not on the Friedman. This is all Friedman side.
The other side of the family.
Other side of the family.
This family didn't have, yeah.
But no, it was a beautiful wedding. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me to see everybody. It was a wedding for young. I'm 80. It was a young.
Right.
It was. We left at 10:30.
That's late.
And it went on. Well, they didn't serve dinner till 10.
Oh my gosh.
I was very hungry. We all had brunch the next day, and the party didn't break up till after 1.
I would have been home. Would not have been there at 1 o'clock.
I was at a table with Nancy Friedlander Greenberg and Don.
2 of my favorites.
Oh, and Beaky and
Sharon.
Oh, sure. Well, I went to school with B.
Yeah,
And they are good friends, dear friends of ours.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And Judy and Terry and Marilyn and me. So we were at the
Oh, you had a nice table.
the Aldecaca table. Marilyn and Sharon, who were 78, were by far the youngest people at the table.
Yeah.
This was a very old table, but it was nice. It was
Fun
really
people.
nice people. I always loved Nancy, and I hadn't really talked to her in years. She's great.
Oh, she is so lovely.
She's a lovely lady.
She is. And Don.
And
is
Don's fun.
a prince.
Yeah.
A prince of a guy.
Yeah.
And nice people. So.
And Beaky was all the way across the table from me, so I
Oh,
could
you
barely
couldn't
talk
talk
to
to
him.
Beak? Okay.
He's also, okay, so here's what Beaky and I share. In addition to the fact that they're good friends of ours, we go to the same manicurist.
Is
As
Beaky?
to- Yeah, as to Sharon.
I didn't know Beaky went to a
He
manicurist.
does once, well, I think he's now every 2 weeks. But I used to be at the manicure right after his. So it was fun, so I'd get to see him, we'd make a date to go out for dinner. And, but now they're in Arizona about half the year, so. And I knew they were coming for the wedding, but they were partners for a long time.
Yeah, he was at Grace Mare forever. I think that was
Well, he
straight
was
out of
president
college.
of Grace Mare
Yeah.
before John took over. Grace, as you know, my partner was Howard Epstein. I told you this. And when Howard and I first bought our business, this is years ago now, the business was self-insured. And it wasn't the kind of business that you should self-insure on. John Lair literally found the insurance companies that would insure us the proper way. And it took him a while. It was hard work. And I have the greatest respect for John and his business sense. He really did a good job, just really good.
He was excellent, that's where we got all of our insurance.
Yeah.
And my husband Harlan once had a car accident a fender bender. But it was his fault. And he said to the woman that he hit, "My insurance company is Grace Mayer. And, call them and they'll take care of it." So this woman calls our house about a week later and is frantic. And I said, "What's wrong?" She goes, "Well, I've looked everywhere in the phone book for Grace Mayer." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? That's our insurance company." She goes, "No, she's not in the phone book." I said, "Aha!"
I'll tell you, when my mother married Al, she got a Grace Mayer credit card. And the gas station thought my mother was Grace Mayer. And she'd pull into the Phillips 66 station and, "Hi, Grace."
It made me so happy to be able to give this woman the phone number and go, no, it's a company, it's not a woman. That's so funny. Okay, so tell me about what you did once you got out of Central High School successfully. And, tell me about what you've done in your businesses and...
Go ahead, Richard. No, go ahead.
Okay. I have a very checkered career. I started off as an historian. I thought that's all I wanted to do. My PhD is in history. I got into academia and I hated it. And I got very depressed and I went into analysis and it was very successful very quickly for me. I started to feel good about myself. So I think, I can't stay in academia. I have to get out. And this is a nice gig. I liked it. It meant everything I want. I really wanted to be self-employed. I did not want to work for people. I wanted to be able to set my own hours. I liked the intellectual quality of the work. And I like being able to help people. When I like history. I still read history. I think about history. But it's so frustrating. The fantasies of, I want to take the founding fathers, just shake them by the lapel and say, "Abolish slavery. You've got the momentum. You've got the revolutionary spirit. Get rid of slavery. You'll save us a horrible civil war. 800,000 guys are going to die because you're too stupid to abolish slavery now. And we have a legacy of racism. Get rid of it. Start now." But you can't because they're dead. So I have a patient come in now, and they're doing the equivalent of continuing slavery. And I can shake them by the lapel and say, "Give it up." My technique's a little bit more refined than that, but I feel I'm making a difference, and I really love it. And I'm 80, I'm still working. And
what kind of a practice do you have? Do you see specific kinds?
It's a very general adult people who have problems in relationships and work. I don't see severely disturbed people.
And get to be your own boss.
Get to be
Make your own hours. That's
exactly
perfect.
And the other advantage, I'm not the most traditional psychoanalyst in the world, but I do have people online on a couch. And my wife teases me that it would be inevitable that I would go into a business that would require me to have a couch in the office because I take a nap every day. I'm a napper. So.
I love that. Okay, Pete, tell me about your business.
I started out as a banker. Spent 12 years in a bank. It was family owned. It was my dad and his two partners. And I liked it a lot. But I had an invitation to go into the wholesale wine and liquor business for about 15 years from my father-in-law. So I did do that, but they weren't my businesses. And when the wholesale wine and liquor business was for sale, I was always told that they would be generous to me in a nice way. And they were, and what it did is allowed me to have a little bit of cash to really look for a business of my own. But I needed a partner, and at the same time, Howard Epstein, who you know, was doing the same thing. And Howard and I served on many boards in this building together, okay? And we years ago, we heard about a business, we saw a business by the name of Sirgus Company, but you would know it as Nebraska Scientific. And we bought Nebraska Scientific and we made it grow. And when we retired, let's see, it was, how long have we been married, Nance?
9 years.
Okay, I retired 8 years ago. And that's what I did. That's my portfolio.
That's great. And tell me about children.
Okay, I've got 3 kids. The oldest one is a CPA in Memphis. The middle one is a college, what would you call her? Counselor. And she lives in Phoenix. And I've got the youngest one who is a
Pediatric social worker.
pediatric social worker.
Been prominent in the field.
And
Wonderful.
where does she live?
She lives in Chicago. She's the head she works for Children's Hospital, and she's the head of their abused children's clinic.
Wow.
All 3 great kids.
Oh,
I love them.
They really kind of set the world on fire sometimes.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
It's fun.
That is great.
It's fun.
Okay.
And
Tell me about your kids.
I have one daughter, Amy, who lives in New York, just a couple blocks from us, fortunately. She has one daughter, the light of our lives, our granddaughter Agnes. And Amy is what's called an art advisor. She has her own company, and she has, when big corporations or wealthy people are buying art, she has a full service company. She goes to auctions. She helps them with, she knows how to bid an auction, so she gets some good prices. A lot of these people are serious collectors, so if they lend their collection to a museum, she knows about insurance, packaging, packing the thing up, restoration. She does all that, and she has a nice business.
That's great.
And she loves art. She loves artists. Artists love her because she brings the money to them. So
Always a good thing.
and she's so the theme runs in the family. She also really wanted to be self-employed, and so she has this nice little business.
Well, I think that's great. Okay, what haven't you told me? What haven't I asked you? More importantly, and what do you want? What else do you want to talk about? I mean, we have a few more minutes. Jared, are you good?
Okay, just one thing. We're sitting in a beautiful building that when it was on the drawing board, I had the pleasure of sitting on the original board.
Ah.
And I did young people. I did high school age people. And Hai Tabachnik was the guy's name who was the director of the Jewish Community Center. And we set out to get these families to join the JCC so we could be with the kids. And I've been, up until about 10 or 15 years ago, when I couldn't do 2 things at once, I got tired. I was fairly active in the Jewish community.
Very active.
Huh?
I think you're very active.
Well, but I was. But that's so when I see this building and everything, why, it was not because of me, but I knew the men that really put it together, and I got to sit with them and listen to them.
Well, it's a pretty special place. It really is. Don't you think so, Jared?
Oh, absolutely.
And even more important than the building, the people who work here are
Absolutely,
top drawer.
absolutely.
Just the best.
I grew up in the old JCC, across the street from Central. Every day after school, I go down and play basketball in the old JCC. In 1954, when what's now the old temple, but was then the new temple was being built, services were held there. So I went to Hebrew school in the JCC building. It was the temple headquarters for a year. I went to school with Judy Verrett, Paul Verrett's daughter. He was the director of the Federation for a million years. So the JCC was really part of my life growing up. But I left Omaha long before this building was built. So this is, I'm really just, I can't get over this building. It's,
And we've been lucky, there have been some very generous people who have done renovation that needed doing and, you know, all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And they're not done. They have great ideas. There's a project at the Blumpkin home that's going on, and so, but what else do you want to tell?
well, one other thing. Omaha was so different in those days. We still had streetcars through the time I was in the 4th grade. And starting either in the 3rd or 4th grade, I had braces, and my orthodontist was downtown, Dr. Weinstein on 16th Street, over the Orpheum Theater. And I'd ride the streetcar down. It's a little picture. I can't imagine it now. But I also started going down with Dickie Zachariah, and we took swimming lessons at the old JCC
Love that.
after school.
Manny Goldberg was it Manny Goldberg?
Yeah.
Manny Goldberg was the athletic director for the
Director.
Jewish Community Center.
Mm-hmm.
Later he bought a
No, at the same time, he had a record store.
record store in Dundee.
Dundee. He had 2 locations. I remember first was right next to the 49er bar.
And then he
And
moved
then
into
next to
Dundee
Baum's.
proper. He was in Dundee next to Baum's.
Next to Baum's drugstore. He had a record store.
Baum's is now a great ice cream store.
Great.
We don't live far from True Dundee.
That was our shopping area. It was a mile east, but that was because I was there on my bike all the time.
A nice neighborhood.
And learning to ride a bike in Omaha gave me really strong legs.
All those hills.
All those hills, exactly. And Peter taught me a trick. I don't know if you remember. I was struggling up a hill. And these were not lightweight bikes. I weighed 40 pounds. I think my bike weighed 30. It was the
old Schwinn
the old
bicycles.
Schwinn, the old fat
Yeah.
Schwinn.
They were steel.
Those were solid bikes. The bikes are probably still around. They're indestructible. Peter taught me to zigzag going up the hill. Do you
That's
remember
right,
teaching-
because you
you
that
remember
is the way
teaching me
you
that?
did it. You had to be careful because cars might come up the zag part. But it worked.
There's no traffic on Underwood in those days. The paving on Underwood stopped at George Boulevard. Everything west, which is basically 60th Street, everything west of George Boulevard was a dirt road going up Underwood.
George Boulevard was not.
And George Boulevard wasn't paved.
It was a dirt road, and then they put rocks on it, and then they finally paved it. And it was a lake. You do George's Lake. And when I was a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my father took me over there and put these things on my legs called ice skates. He gave me this big stick called a hockey stick and took this little black thing and threw it on the ice. And he said, "Now I'm going to have to teach you how to ice skate and play hockey." And we did that. I played hockey all my kid life. And that was my first go, was George's Lake.
Well, and as you know, we used to live on J.E. George, but we lived
Farther-
south of Underwood.
Where Phyllis, where Phyllis's folks,
2 doors away from where Phyllis grew
yeah,
up.
where
Phyllis
Phyllis,
didn't grow up there. They
she
moved
grew
that-
up on 58.
No, on
Her
57th
folks-
Avenue.
Her folks moved there
Parents moved there.
Phyllis was already in college.
right before Phyllis and Dick got married.
Right. Phyllis was already in college. Bruce grew up on North 57th Avenue in the 700 block, right next to that alley.
That's right.
God, I spent a lot of time in that house.
So did I.
Fun people.
Yeah.
So did I. We used to walk in, and then when you walked in, you turned to the north, and that was their
den.
that was their den. And Mickey was she was one of the few parents that said, "Come on in, kids, just wipe your feet."
Mickey was, and Peter had, Mickey was really strict. She set standards. Peter was not, she adored Peter. Peter was the exception. I can't say that Peter got away with stuff, but she would overlook things that she wouldn't overlook at any other kid.
Wow.
I don't know, why'd she like you so much?
Because I waxed her cars.
Oh, there you go.
I had an old Ford. It was a kid's car. And Mickey would, on a Saturday, say, you know, I'll pay you $20. And boy, that was big money.
Yeah.
Yeah, to wax my brand new Plymouth convertible. So I would wax her convertible, and she'd take my old Ford car and she'd drive it out to the Highland Country Club for a card game.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No,
Oh,
no. But
yeah.
I knew something like that. And I adored Dave Bernstein. He was a great guy.
And Mickey was already gone by the time I moved here. But Phyllis adored her father.
Dave. Oh,
Just adored her father and just despised the woman that he married.
yeah.
Boots. And when Phyllis and Bruce were together, they used to talk, I mean, the way they talked about this poor woman, and they had absolutely nothing nice to ever say about her.
No,
What was her name?
Boots.
Boots.
Booth.
And they were living, I think, in Detroit then.
Yeah. Dave moved to. Well, they had. They didn't own Froth. They owned the. It was called Independent Metal Company, and they had
built
one
truck
customer.
trailers.
They built the not the trailers. They built the tank, the liquid.
Oh, that's it. Truck.
They had a huge plant on what's now off Abbott Drive, but then it was just a 2-lane little nothing road. And there's a bunch of factories along there, and Independent Metal made these big things, but they only had one customer. They didn't sell it themselves. Everything was sold through Fruhoff. I don't know what that's called technically. And they had this deal, and Fruhoff bought them finally for a lot of money. And Dave became a vice president. Dave was a great salesman. I don't know why this didn't work out, but within 2 or 3 years he was out with plenty of dough, but he was good looking like a movie star.
Oh, so handsome.
And he was also just a lovely guy. He was so great to me when I was a kid. I adored him. And so he moved to Detroit and started an auto parts business or something. I don't know why he moved to. Everything was in Omaha, and Mickey had died.
I think maybe that's where Boots lived.
And I think that's where he met this woman. And I just heard about her.
They just despised her. And he died
He also died young.
1986 on like April 17th or something. The only reason why I remember is because I had had my first child, and I was in the hospital with her when he died. And Phyllis, and so we didn't go to the funeral because I was still in the hospital. So you remember dates.
Yeah.
So what else? And you can always add, right, Jared?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't ask questions. I could talk for 24 hours nonstop, I'm sure.
Okay, here's, let's say that because I'm sure Jared has places to go.
Jared, do you have any questions?
A few other projects. No, this is great. I enjoy
Okay,
it.
so here's a question for you. What's your favorite memory of your parents? Your father and mother?
I have one. My mom and dad, one of the things they really always wanted to do was to go to Europe. And I was a senior in high school. I was 17 years old, and I was going to drive them to the airport. And my mother was dressed to the T. High-heeled shoes. Even I thought it was a nice dress. My dad had on a brand new sports coat and trousers, and they were going to Europe. And I always thought that was the neatest thing. And now when I look at it, and if we were going to Europe, if I wouldn't wear sweats, I'd wear shorts, and I'd wear a sweatshirt instead of a jacket if it were warm enough.
But in those days, you got dressed to go.
But
on
in
airplanes.
those days, my point is, in those days, you got dressed to go to Europe.
To fly to Chicago.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. My dad would put on would wear a jacket and tie.
Why do I remember it? Because they were so striking in it. That's what I remember. I can remember good times and fun times, but we had a lot of those. We only went to Europe like that the first time, and you know that's what I can remember.
I think family dinners, not only when the whole family gathered, but my dad would be home from work. We had dinner at 5:30. The store closed at 6. He was home. We'd have dinner. As I said, my mother was not the greatest cook, but food was adequate. And we talked at the dinner table, the four of us. And my parents would genuinely ask questions. And they knew the names of all of our friends. They knew the names of our teachers. They liked most of our friends. The handful of friends they didn't like, and we knew who they didn't like and why. My dad wasn't in a formal sense an intellectual, but he was a very learned guy. And he was a very smart guy. And we would talk about things in real depth. How businesses work.
Just remember something.
Oh, go ahead, dear.
Okay. Richard's dad and our grandfather, after family dinners, would go to the front porch, spring, summer, and fall, and talk Yiddish. And no one knew what the hell they were talking
I
about.
love that.
That's it. They were the only two people in our whole family that I ever heard talk, and they would only do it. They probably did it before that, but they would only do it when we were done with dinner and they wanted to talk about something.
Well, my dad was born here, but his parents were immigrants. And my dad spoke no English till he started school. So
that's where he learned Yiddish.
Yeah, of course. And his mother never really learned English very well, my Friedman grandmother.
And of course, my grandfather learned Yiddish.
Well, he was 3 years old when he came here. So, and his parents, I don't think, ever learned English. They were middle-aged
You know,
people.
when Grandpa Bernstein was 8 or 9 years old, before he was driving his horse cart, he and Jake Isaacson would sell newspapers on 10th and Harney or 10th and Douglas every morning to their parents.
Yes. There was
They didn't finish school.
no. Grandpa dropped out in 8th grade.
Probably had to go to work.
He did. He
To
did.
support the
Went to
family.
work.
His father died, and that was it. That was it. But Grandpa continued to read throughout his whole life and was a well-educated man. And now this is deep Jewish stuff. My father and Friedman and his father-in-law were not that far apart in age, only about 5 years apart. They spoke the same brand of Yiddish. They had the same accent. The Friedmans were from Lithuania, and the Bernsteins were from probably Belarus. It was close enough. And I think Grandpa shared this prejudice. My dad had a deep prejudice against Galicianers, Jews from the southern Poland. My wife is a Galicianer, and my dad was so pleased that he found a nice Litvaker family to marry into. I don't think anybody even knows about that stuff anymore.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why Omaha had so many different synagogues.
Right.
Yeah.
Freud had a wonderful term for this. He called it the narcissism of small differences.
Well, and that's it. They're, reading through the Historical Society and learning about this museum project, how many synagogues there were here, and they were all done that way because...
Oh, they were called it the Hungarian synagogue.
And the Kapulia shul, and the Rosh shul, and because they were all disdainful of somebody else. They were always better than somebody else.
This is the old Jewish joke. The old Jewish guy stranded on a desert island, and he gets rescued. He's been there for 10 years. And the captain of the ship who rescues him said, "Boy, I see you built this stone house. That's something." He said, "What's that other stone building over there?" He says, "That's my shul. That's where I daven." He said, "And that other one over there?" He says, "That's the shul I wouldn't step foot in."
Oh,
Oh.
yeah. I'm a Cubs fan. I want everybody to know it, and I want it recorded. I've been going to the Cubs game since I've been 7 years old. Do you remember when Grandpa and I would get on a train?
Yeah.
And we go Friday night. We go to the Cubs game. Friday night we take the train to Chicago. Saturday we'd watch the game. Saturday evening we'd get on the L, go back to the train station, ride the train back. My mother would pick us up, and I'd go to bed all day Sunday. I was just a little boy then, though.
And Grandpa was a real Cubs fan.
Oh God, was he a Cubs fan?
And he took Uncle Harold. Uncle Harold had a pony when he was a little boy, and the pony died, and he was inconsolable. And Grandpa took Uncle Harold into Chicago for a Cubs game. And his sisters never got over that Harold got the pony. They never got any gift even remotely like. Grandpa was really generous, and no one knew when his birthday was. He was born the third, maybe the third candle of Hanukkah, but we don't know what year. The Tsar was, it was one of those kinds of deals. So the family arbitrarily decided his birthday was Christmas Eve, December 24th. It's on his tombstone, December 24th. Total fiction. And they decided December 24th because the stores would close after the Christmas season. And at 5 o'clock, everybody would gather at our house, and Grandpa would have a birthday party. And there was all kinds of rituals connected with it. Ida Arkin, his husband, worked for Grandpa, and she would make this...
Mose. Was it Mose?
What was her husband's name?
That's all right.
And we'd drive down. They lived across the street from the Jocelyn Castle. We'd pick up this angel food cake. It's delicious. Come down and all these other rituals. But I don't think Grandpa ever got a present. And there was never even an issue. Grandpa would give presents. So he was really generous. But Harold got the pony.
No, we were brought up properly. Our parents were good. I was very hard to bring up. I sometimes didn't walk a straight line.
He was the best.
Oh, I don't know, he flew under the bridge of the Exarban Bridge.
I don't know that story.
You want to know if okay.
He did some really
But
wild and crazy things.
But nothing illegal. He drove illegally. He drove from the age of 12 on or something. He liked to drive. And Uncle, I don't know, how did your dad let you do that?
He just did, because it was easier for him. Go get something, go to the grocery store, go do it. I was big enough to sit behind the wheel, and I drove.
Peter got an electric razor for his bar mitzvah. He looked older.
Yeah, I did. But anyway, okay. John Warren went to high school in Council Bluffs, not Omaha, but he was my buddy. His dad in World War II flew airplanes off a carrier, the real thing. So did Nancy's uncle, by the way. But anyway, it was the real thing. And John had been flying with his dad since John probably was since his dad had been out of the Navy. Probably since he'd been 5 years old. And John and I were in the habit sometimes on Friday summer nights going to the old Council Bluffs airport. And John Warren's dad owned a Warren Feed Company. And instead of driving to see the farmers, he could see more of them if he flew in. And they told him, don't forget this guy knew how to do this. Flew in and landed on a road that was long enough to have him land and long enough so he could take off again. And John had been doing that with his dad for years, just years. And when his dad was trying to figure things out or things like that, John was really flying the airplane. I mean, at 14 years old, this kid could fly an airplane. So anyway, John and I were, the summer before my senior year of high school, John and I were together, and we were doing some tricks up there. And do you guys remember the old Exarban Bridge? Does anybody? It was built like that.
It's Douglas Street. There was an extension of Douglas Street.
Yeah,
Yes,
it was
yes,
built
yes,
like
yes.
that. Okay. And one evening, John and I were up there, and John said, well, watch this. And we flew under the bridge.
Peter, I never knew that story.
Oh, yeah, we flew under the bridge.
But that wasn't Peter doing it. He was just a
Maybe the
passenger.
Paper the night
And the next day, the next morning, small airplane flies over the bridge, and my dad caught on right away. Also, when I got home, I started throwing up. So that's my John Warren story. That's what John and I did together.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up for today, but we can always add to this. And eventually we'll get this digitized and online and send you a copy, right?
Yeah.
And so
That'll be great.
I hope this has been as much fun for you
It's
as
a
it
lot
is
of
for
fun.
me.
Yeah.
Oh, we look forward to
These
it.
stories, they're so great.
These are old Omaha stories. You couldn't do some of the stuff we did and we got away with.
You got away with it.
Yeah, I had a good friend by the name of Murphy who went to Central
Big
High School.
Murph.
Can I tell the story?
Oh, yeah, Big Murph.
Okay. In Central High School, they had a tradition, which was a bad one, that they'd take the smaller kids, most of them were Jewish because they were small, and they were freshmen because it went freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then take them up to the third landing, put them in cans, and roll them down.
Oh my God.
And first they take their lunch money.
Yeah.
And this was really bad. And I was really worried about this.
I was 4'10" my freshman year.
And I was really worried about this. And one Saturday afternoon, Jim Murphy, who played football at Central, who was a year younger than the most of us, no, a year behind most of us. He wasn't younger, a year behind. Murph was over, and I said, Murph, you mind coming up and meeting my cousin Richard? And Murph said, no. He said, where's he live? I said, 2 blocks away, and we drove up there. Hi, Richard. Richard, I want you to meet Jim Murphy. And,
Huge guy, enormous.
Jim said, hi, Richard. Nice to see you. I understand you're going to be at Central, and that's it. They left it alone. Richard got to Central, and a bunch of his little friends were there, and a bunch of the seniors, and most of them were, the jocks and everything, were going to can these kids. Until Murphy moved up. And Murphy walked around, and he went like this, and he said, you guys, I want you to meet my friend Richard Friedman.
No. First he said, he walked up to me, and he went like this. He said, anybody you want taken care of?
And then he put his arm
Yeah,
around, and they never bothered those kids again, never. But Murph knew why. He was really down deep. He was a nice guy. He was not a bully. He turned out to own a string of beauty supply stores in California.
Nice.
Yeah, he did well.
He was really a nice guy.